Joining us on stage is Sundaa Bridgett-Jones from the Rockefeller Foundation.
What happened in Detroit could happen anywhere. Communities that have these industries that may go bust in the future, what will happen to them?
You start thinking about where is your water going to come from in the future?
Big coastal storms go right to the heart and they push the off button.
A city is the reflection of your ideas, of the way you think. At some point, we had to challenge our ideas.
Rebuilding back to the same level of the same things may not be the smart thing to do.
If we stick to our old way of doing it, we will fail.
This is what we live for. We live to design our way out of problems.
You have to design forward in a way that human beings aren't used to. That's what resilience is all about.
The Resilience Age is part of a kind of multifaceted effort at the Rockefeller Foundation to help us think a little bit differently about the application of resilience concepts and practices. So I really do commend that you all commend the video. It's a really fantastic way to see the kinds of challenges that various cities are facing and what they're doing about it, and what kinds of innovations that they're putting in. And as I mentioned, the foundation is been on this journey for the past decade, basically. We've been thinking about the notion of resilience, and that is defined by the kinds of adaptive capacities that individuals and communities and institutions and systems have to basically deal with a number of shocks and stresses. They can be shocks that we might know about, or ones that are pretty much unforeseen. And so we've been really hoping that by 2025, the efforts that we've invested in and the support that we give to cities and others will work towards resilience, practice being business as usual. But as we're talking here today about the notion of the application of design, of thinking about the impact of design, we started wondering particularly about a scale that is much bigger than what Maggie talked about, but obviously is a system of systems, a system of individuals and people and communities working together. And if our desired state is a more resilient city, then what exactly does that look like? And here is just a really fantastic photograph of a design competition called Rebuild by Design that took place after Superstorm Sandy to help to reimagine what lower Manhattan might look like to deal with issues of sea level rise. And instead of thinking of building a seawall, this tries to think of what green space we might be able to pull together and what benefits would that have not just for sea level rise, but what additional benefits it might have for others. So this is just one of several different investments that we've made, about $500,000 over the past decade in resilience networks and innovations like competitions and others to help to bring to fore crowdsourcing new innovations around resilience and what that looks like in communities. A lot of the thinking, though, has been informed by our experiences with these devastating events of Katrina, Superstorm Sandy, and many others. It really causes us to shift our paradigms and thinking of not just about preparedness, but what does it take? I think someone mentioned it before, to not think about the time now, but what should this system look like? What should our activities be like? What would the benefits be over a period of time? And how can we start to think about that differently? And each of these unfortunate events have really, I think, shaped the way cities are thinking now about urban planning and what needs to happen in the future. But for the foundation, innovation has been at the heart of our thinking around this. And I have some colleagues here, Amira Bliss and Kippy Joseph, who've been working a lot on this notion of innovation. And obviously, HCD is just one part of it. I mentioned the open innovation that we've been using, the crowdsourcing, the challenges, and others. There are certainly expert innovation, expert-led design as well. But this has really been at the crux of our thinking, a signature approach that we feel like we have at the foundation in thinking about how can we make transformational impact and what role does innovation play in that. So we like to look everywhere for different kinds of solutions, trying to bring together, using our convening power to bring a number of different people together, designers, engineers, academics, advocates, community leaders together to try to solve problems We want to take really smart risks. I think our colleague today from Autodesk mentioned that philanthropy is risk capital, and we believe that as well, to try to find new ideas and new solutions and catalyze the kind of thinking that needs to be done around bringing about change. But one of the things that is really critical for us is thinking in systems of how we take a more comprehensive approach to solving problems. And we put forth a design challenge 3 years ago, and that is, how do we start to help cities think about becoming more resilient? What kinds of tools or processes and approaches might they need to be able to do that? And most importantly, how can we be supportive of creating a tool that the cities can use themselves? Not that we would have other third-party users coming in and leading them through a process, but they can actually do some of the self-assessment to think about where their vulnerabilities are, where they do well, where they might be able to recombine different activities to make a city run better. So we want it to be tangible, practical, and we also wanted it to be globally applicable. So in some ways, we were using human-centered design to come up with a tool that would be implemented by using human-centered design. And I would like to talk about that when we get into the Q&A section. So we worked with a partner called Arup, and they are an engineering firm. And we started off by not looking at wanting to think about how do cities start to think of whether they're ready or not, whether they're resilient or not, and the extent to which they are. But instead of going directly, because there was a push to have an index, not to compare cities, but again to look at the different variabilities, instead of looking at what data they have currently to be measured, we started to talk about, well, what really matters in terms of resilient cities? And that led to a great research effort over the past 3 years around the cities that are noted here, 28 cities, and having a number of people, including mayors, city administrators, other city administrators, as I mentioned before, community leaders and others come together to think through what matters in terms of a resilient city, and starting to think about that as we approached the development of a city resilience index. And this has been for us and for our partner Arup and many others, folks who are working on urban planning and looking at resilience and how do we deal with the 21st century challenges of globalization, urbanization, and climate change, led us to this. And we feel like it's a really comprehensive way of thinking about what matters in the cities and how cities can start to assess whether they do well in certain areas or not. So there are 4 dimensions. I'll go into them very briefly, but there's a dimension around health and well-being, economy, society, infrastructure and environment, and leadership and strategy. And there are several different goals related to each of them. And behind this index are both qualitative and quantitative measures that are noted there. This is all on an online platform for cities to be able to use on www.cityresilience.org. And we've piloted it in 5 cities across the world: Arusha, Liverpool, Hong Kong, Concepcion, and we are on the road to actually having 20 to 25 cities completed by the end of the year. And what's so important, for cities, and we first always look at infrastructure, but it's really the heart of it is the people and ensuring their health and well-being, and identifying the kinds of indicators, both qualitative and quantitative, that speak to the extent to which there are minimal human vulnerabilities, and look at livelihoods and look at human life and well-being. Just the same in terms of the bottom right part of this annual list is focused on the kinds of social and financial systems that help people live and work and have fun in cities. So looking at these different aspects, so there are indicators related to that. There's certainly indicators in terms of looking at the place where we live and the kinds of connectivity that's taking place within our cities, and being able to observe and assess that. And then finally, and one of the things that I think is really important in thinking about the health of a city, if you will, and the resilience of a city, is the notion of leadership and strategy, is the knowledge that is imparted or shared by not only the mayors and the others who are in the administration, but but many others, teachers and academics and community activists in the city, and how those all come together to inform decision-making in cities. So if a city decides to do this, they do the assessment and they do it online, they have a full team of people. It's not just in the mayor's offices to be done, but it really does require having a number of different stakeholders within the city, including and outside of the city, come together to be able to answer some of the questions. And also put forth some workshops, stakeholder workshops, and others with community to get at some of the qualitative dimensions of this. And this is just a quick demonstration of what a city receives after completing it, and they call it city resilience profiles. So you can see in these spider graphs which ones, where they're weakest, where they're strongest, and this can be used as a decision support tool in coming up with different strategies that they might have. So where this has been really fantastic, and I'll speak to this again in a minute, is in our efforts to help cities in our 100 Resilient Cities initiative, where they've identified city resilience officers and others who are looking carefully at these various dimensions and are starting to think more creatively and innovatively about how it is that they might plan for the future, and they can use these profiles in their decision making, which has been very well received by city resilience officers and others. Just another example of how this has been used, this is the notion of how do we frame resilience in different contexts. We've been talking at this moment about the city scale and looking at a city as a system and a system of systems. But if we went back to thinking of one particular population in a place, how do we go around the annulus and think of what a child-centered urban place looks like? And so the index and the framework that undergirds the index has helped Plan Action, which is an NGO working internationally, develop this child-centered urban resilience framework. I had mentioned 100 Resilient Cities is very much an important part of their process, their strategic planning process, and using it as a tool to get at perceptions that citizens have in cities and others, and as I mentioned before, using it to plan out their next activities. This is a fundamental part of our broader thinking around measuring resilience. So what does it look like in communities? And how do I know it when I see it? And what impact does this thinking have on the communities, not only in terms of their preparedness, but their ability to thrive in the face of different stresses? And I mentioned already the 5 pilots here. And these are other spin-offs that we hope to learn much more about in terms of how do you use the notions, the fundamental concepts of the City Resilience Framework and Index, and thinking of participatory systems on urban health, or looking at resilient infrastructure, just as 2 examples. So we definitely have a lot of learning ahead, and I hope that I can share with you in the year's time the value proposition that the index has had for cities around the world, and how they think of using a tool that was created by the notions with the notions of human-centered design in mind, used with those notions in mind, and trying to understand what additional benefits that might have for how we live in cities. Thank you.